In the ruined village square under a blood-orange dusk, the storyteller opened without preamble. The bride stood in ragged finery, the groom in a polished uniform dusted with ash, and little Amina, eyes wide and mud-streaked, pointed at the woman beside him and said, "Mama? Ah." Saeed, the survivor who had sworn to hate the man who burned his home, stepped forward, voice raw, and said, "You brought her back to betray us?" The woman's calm cracked. The commander said, "She was never dead." The whisper landed like ice and the crowd inhaled as memory and rage tangled in Saeed's fists. He saw the burned pendant on her neck, the same as his missing sister's, and the storyteller noted the silence thick enough to slice through. After the stunned silence, murmurs swelled and then receded into a brittle hush as villagers edged closer, searching faces for meaning. Amina clung to the woman's skirt and said, "You promised you'd come back." The woman looked down, confusion warbling beneath something like recognition, and the storyteller revealed that she had been taken years ago during the fire and returned without memory, her mind stitched with gaps. Saeed knelt, brushing ash from Amina's hair, and said, "If she is your mother, why does she not know your name?" The woman lifted her eyes, and in them was a fracture of memory, a flicker of a lullaby half remembered, making her whisper, "I heard it once." The commander remained at the edge, expression unreadable, as the first tear slid down Amina's cheek, catching dying light. Saeed rose and confronted the commander, voice low and edged. "You dragged her here with your lies. What did you trade for her silence?" The commander said, "She was the key to holding the border, and you would have burned with them if she stayed lost." Saeed snapped, "You burned my village anyway." The commander's gaze flicked to the woman, then back, and he offered nothing like apology, only a brittle explanation that she had once saved his life during a raid, that her survival had become his leverage, and her return was both repayment and bait. The storyteller noted the weight in Saeed's jaw as betrayal doubled on betrayal, and the woman, overhearing, touched the pendant and felt a ghost of warmth she could not place. The woman retreated to the edge of the square, the storyteller describing her trembling as a memory surfaced in splinters, flames licking a wooden doorway, her own small hand reaching for a child's, a scream muffled by smoke, and then a strange man, older, with kind eyes, handing her the pendant, whispering, "Promise me you will find them." She had shoved the image away for years, but the burned symbol on the pendant glowed faintly now, and she said to nobody in particular, "I promise." Saeed, hearing the broken confession, stepped closer and said, "That pendant belonged to my sister. She gave it to me before the fire." The storyteller let the silence stretch, the crowd holding their breath as the possibility of connection bloomed like a fragile wound. Saeed took a step toward the woman, the storyteller describing his internal pull between hatred and the faint echo of something more complicated, and said, "If she remembers promise, then there is a story that ties us beyond ashes." The woman turned fully, eyes wet, and whispered, "I remember a child with your eyes and a song about home." Amina wiped her cheek and said, "Mama, you are here." The commander's expression flickered, for the first time betrayed by uncertainty, and he muttered, "This was never supposed to unravel so fast." Saeed lifted the pendant, holding it between them, and said, "Then we begin to pull the threads." The storyteller closed the scene on the trembling promise of investigation, the hatred sharpening into a hunger for truth. The investigation unfurled like a wounded animal, slow and dangerous, as Saeed and the woman retreated to a makeshift shelter of collapsed beams, while Amina watched from a distance clutching a rag. Saeed said, "Tell me everything you see when the pendant burns warm." The woman closed her eyes and described fragments, a river at dawn, a boy with a scar on his forehead singing a lullaby, and a hidden cave where voices whispered plans. The storyteller noted that each image landed with the weight of half-truths, and Saeed felt the ache of recognition when she murmured the lullaby that his mother had hummed before the fire. He asked, "Who put the pendant on you?" And she answered, "A man with kind eyes who said I had to vanish to keep them safe." In that moment the seed of alliance deepened, and the commander's watchful silhouette lingered beyond the firelight like a threat waiting to strike. traveled to the edge of the burned forest with the woman and Amina, the storyteller detailing how the trees stood like charred sentinels, their blackened ribs clawing at the sky. He said, "The lullaby came from here. Someone was hiding in these trees." The woman traced a path with trembling fingers, and Amina whispered the melody, filling the hollow silence with haunting notes. They discovered a shallow depression in the earth covered by brittle leaves, and beneath it the remains of a small carved box with symbols matching the pendant. The woman touched the carvings and gasped as a flash of a boy with the forehead scar appeared in her mind, reaching out and shouting, "Run!" Saeed said then he was protecting more than one family. The storyteller emphasized the growing complexity. That protection had been woven into betrayal and survival. Back in the village, Saeed confronted an elder who had survived the flames, seeking anyone who might recognize the symbols and the lullaby. The elder, hunched with age, said, "That song belonged to the border children hidden when the war first started. The mark was their secret pact to keep each other safe." The storyteller described the elder's voice cracking as he added, "They split families to confuse the raiders, and some were taken, given new names, given false deaths." The woman whispered, "The boy with the scar, was he one of those hidden?" The elder nodded slowly and said, "He was called Harif, the one who could see danger before it came, and he vanished after saving many." Saeed held the elder's gaze and said, "Then the pendant carried more than memory, it carried responsibility." The storyteller let the implication settle that the returning woman and Harif's legacy were entangled in a larger plan. The commander called a private session, inviting Saeed under the pretense of negotiating cooperation, and the storyteller described the tension like a held breath in a storm. The commander said, "You have curiosity. I have the leverage to keep your people safe, if you play along." Saeed replied, "Leverage built on ashes and stolen lives is poison." The commander, with a flicker of something unreadable, offered a proposal. Help him locate the remaining guardians of the border, in exchange for sparing the woman and village from further raids. The woman, hidden in the doorway, heard him add softly, "Start with Harif's old allies. They still whisper to each other in code." Saeed said, "I will not bargain with the man who burned my home, but I will follow the trail if it leads to truth." The storyteller noted that the agreement hung unspoken like a trap with a half-opened door. That night, the storyteller described Saeed and the woman sharing their fragmented findings under a silver crescent moon, the village quiet except for distant crackles of residual fire. Amina slept curled against a makeshift cushion, while Saeed spread sketches and charred maps across a rough table. The woman whispered, "Harif's allies used a pattern of stolen songs to signal safety. The lullaby was one piece, the other was a rhythm tapped twice then once." Say tapped his palm accordingly, and heard in the silence the echo of recognition from an old guard posted nearby, who then slipped a folded note under the door before vanishing. The note contained a single line, "Keep faith with the scar and the song." Saeed said, "We are not alone." The storyteller closed the act on that fragile reassurance, the rising conflict now carrying a thread of hope braided with danger. The storyteller described the next step as Saeed and the woman followed the coded rhythm through the village, tapping twice then once on doorframes and tree trunks, seeking a response. An old guard, gaunt and wary, paused where the pattern echoed back faintly from a broken wind chime and slipped from shadow, whispering, "Harif's network still listens. They hide in plain grief." The woman repeated the lullaby, and the guard's eyes softened, revealing a scar matching the boy's description. Saeed demanded, "Who are you protecting now?" The guard said, "The ones who survived because of promises made in fire. We keep them hidden from those who would use them." He extended a trembling fist, revealing a faded symbol that mirrored the pendant, and said, "Follow the river east. The next whisper is buried beneath the old watermill." The storyteller noted that each ally came with cost, and the cost here was trust stretched thin. They followed the river east to the derelict watermill, its wheel frozen mid-rotation, algae clinging like a slow bruise. The guard stayed back, watching as the woman placed her palm against damp stone and hummed the lullaby. Water trembled in stagnant pools and revealed a faint glyph beneath moss. Saeed said, "If this is a trap, I will burn it again." The woman answered, "The rhythm calls survivors, not death." The storyteller showed how a hidden compartment creaked open, releasing a brittle scroll sealed with wax bearing the same mark as the pendant. On it was a list of names and dates, and a marginal note in a child's hand that read, "He saved us, keep him safe." The woman's fingers shook, whispering, "Harif wrote this." Saeed read aloud, "They were scattered to survive, some taken, some hidden, none forgotten. The river's quiet carried their vow forward." Armed with the scroll, Saeed returned to the elder who had named Harif, demanding to trace the living threads of the list. The storyteller conveyed the elder's trembling as he traced names, saying, "Some went north as refugees. One joined the traveling healers clan, another was taken by a neighboring lord and renamed." The woman asked, "Is there any record of Harif after he vanished?" The elder produced a sealed letter, sealed in wax cracked like old earth, and read aloud a fragment. "Danger before it comes is a burden. I bury us deeper." Saeed pressed, "Who carries that burden now?" The elder's eyes flickered to the woman and whispered, "Maybe the one who returns with his echo." The storyteller let the silence roar, suggesting Harif's legacy wasn't dead. It had become a shadow threaded through the woman's fractured memory. The commander, sensing the shifting currents, summoned the woman alone, and the storyteller described the room as a calculated void, candles guttering as if breathing with restraint. He said, "You were valuable to me, and now your past is surfacing. That makes you dangerous." She replied, "You used my survival to bind others. You built fences with names and scars." He leaned forward, voice low, and said, "Truth can topple empires or save them. Help me find who still remembers Harif, and I will protect the ones tied to you." She answered, "Protection from you is a cage, and I am already entangled." The commander, irritated, slid a folded photograph across the table. The boy with the scar, younger, smiling with the pendant around his neck, and said, "Then decide. Do you free him by revealing him, or bury him to keep the net intact?" The storyteller noted how the offer twisted into threat, making her realize the battlefield had widened beyond memory. The storyteller showed the fracture growing. Saeed returned with news from the elder while the woman struggled with the commander's ultimatum, and Amina overheard snatches and asked, "If Harif is in me, does that mean he chose this?" The woman knelt, smoothing Amina's hair, and said, "He chose survival and seeded us with his warning. The war made ghosts into guardians." Saeed said, "We have a chance to find the ones he scattered before the commander uses them as pawns." The woman, voice breaking, admitted, "Revealing him might draw fire, but hiding him lets the net tighten further." The storyteller described the moment as a fracture ready to split, Saeed offering a plan to reach out to Harif's traveling allies under the guise of seeking border repairs, the woman agreeing with a condition that they do it her way, preserving what remained of Harif's intention. The act closed with the tension of approaching collision. The storyteller described the first breach as the plan moved into motion. Saeed and the woman traveled under cover of pre-dawn mist to a remote healer's caravan claimed to harbor one of Harif's scattered allies. They arrived to find the caravan guarded by 3 wary travelers, and the woman stepped forward, humming the lullaby while Saeed tapped the rhythm twice, then once on the caravan's wooden frame. One of the travelers, a wiry woman with gray-streaked braids, lowered her hand from a knife and said, "He didn't vanish, he hit us in pieces." Saeed asked, "Will you stand with us or turn away?" The gray-braided woman replied, "We survive because he taught us to listen, but the commander's shadow lengthens. If you betray the code, you burn what remains." The storyteller let the tension hang. The alliance required sacrifice. The newly uneasy ally revealed that Harif had created a hidden codebook of safe routes and false names stitched into traveling songs, and the storyteller described how the woman, looking at the frayed cloth pages, felt a spike of clarity. A phrase she had dismissed as nonsense matched the shape of the boy's scar in a folded pattern. The gray-braided traveler said, "He tangled truth with lies so enemies could not follow. The commander hunts the echoes now." Saeed said, "Then we give him new echoes." The woman added, "We let him think we prey on his spies while we feed Harif's message deeper." The storyteller noted the dangerous artistry. Deception layered over protection, and the caravan's patient watchers became collaborators in a war of shadows. Armed with the updated code, the storyteller showed Saeed arranging a misinformation operation. False reports of a border breach were sent through planted whispers, while the real movement targeted the commander's reconnaissance post. The woman went to the perimeter, disguised as a traveling healer, and the gray-braided ally accompanied her, carrying herbs that masked their scent. The commander's scouts, misled by the fabricated noise, mobilized in the wrong valley, and Saeed watched from the ridge, saying, "He's chasing ghosts, we have the window." The woman whispered. Harif would have smiled at the irony of him being lured by his own fear. The storyteller emphasized the escalation. The commander's reach had been baited, and the cost of the ruse tightened their moral grip. The twist arrived when the commander, frustrated by the misdirection, doubled down and seized a young messenger believed to carry one of Harif's signals. The storyteller described the moment the messenger, bound in a damp cellar, revealed under pressure that the woman's voice had been recognized in the lullaby variation, and that someone close had betrayed the false trail. Saeed, furious, demanded, "Who slipped?" The messenger, trembling, whispered, "The guard at the north gate. He watched the rhythm and thought to sell it for safety." The woman said, "He broke the code." Saeed replied, "Then we burn the cover and rebuild trust." The storyteller showed the fracture inside their fragile network and the looming need to confront betrayal before it consumed them. To salvage the web, the storyteller described Saeed confronting the compromised guard in private. The guard crumpled with guilt and fear, and the woman insisting on hearing his reasoning. He said, "I saw the commander's men circling. I thought feeding them false whispers would save innocence, not knowing he'd twisted into leverage." The woman replied, "Your fear burned a line through the code. You can mend it only by carrying the truth forward and bearing the risk." Saeed said, "You will lead the next diversion and expose the commander's overreach. Loyalty now is action." The guard bowed, trembling, and the storyteller allowed a moment of brittle reconciliation. The twist confirming that even allies could fracture, and that survival meant choosing who to forgive. The storyteller described the moment before the storm as calm broken by intent. Saeed, the woman, and their fragile circle prepared the diversion that would draw the commander's forces into overreach. Saeed said, "We feed him the false breach, then move the real supply through the healer's route." The woman added, "And his scouts will report what they expect, not what's true, giving us the hour." Amina, watching the coded preparations, whispered, "Harif's echo is loud enough now." The storyteller noted that hope had teeth. The compromised guard, now interpreter of truth, tapped the rhythm at each juncture to reassure hesitant allies, and the gray-braided healer stitched the false names into travel songs, layering deceit over protection. Saeed tightened his grip on the map and said, "If he snaps the thread, we burn the rest to free what's left." The alliance held breath, knowing the climax was sharpening. The diversion went live as dawn cracked. The storyteller showed scouts bringing news of movement in the wrong valley while Saeed and the woman slipped through a guarded path, their disguises tight and their hearts tighter. The commander, flushed with certainty, ordered troops to converge and said, "Seal that valley. The breach is here." Saeed murmured to the woman, "He's chasing his own shadow." And she replied, "Good. Shadows don't see what's real." They reached a hidden cache where the traveling allies had stashed supplies and messages, and the gray-braided woman whispered, "Harif built this to outlast any betrayal." The storyteller emphasized the rising stakes. The false front drew the commander's bulk away, but the cost was exposure. One misstep, and the entire network would unravel like burned cloth. Word reached the commander that his scouts had been deceived, and the storyteller showed his fury as a sharp, sudden wind. He declared, "They played me, and now we cut deeper." He sent elite trackers to reroute and comb the real paths, and Saeed received the warning through the compromised guard who arrived breathless, saying, "He's adjusting. They're coming back faster than we counted." The woman tightened, saying, "Then we accelerate before he sees the seams." The storyteller turned to the internal fracture. The guard confessed that doubt now gnawed at him, fearing the commander might discover his earlier betrayal and use it to undo their fragile reconciliation. Saeed replied, "Then stay true. Pain from the past buys the chance for future truth." The act teetered. The climax was no longer looming, it was colliding. The storyteller described the turning moment when the woman chose to confront the commander directly, not with brute force, but with a mirror of his own manipulation. She entered the command tent under the pretense of surrendering newly discovered Harif intelligence, and the commander leaned forward, hungry for confirmation, saying, "So you betrayed them to save yourself?" She replied, "I brought you the echo you crave, but it is hollow. Your men are running into the real trap." His face flickered between anger and calculation, and the storyteller noted that while he prepared to strike, the woman, voice low, added, "If you break the code, the ones you thought bound to you will untether, and the truth you own will burn your legacy." Saeed watched from a distance, heart lodged between hope and dread. The storyteller closed the act on rupture and revelation. The commander, enraged by manipulation, unleashed a sweep to trap the real movement, and the woman signaled Saeed with the coded lullaby reversed, a desperate inversion that meant retreat now or perish. Saeed shouted, "Pull back! He's collapsing both valleys." The gray-braided healer executed a secondary diversion by setting controlled fires to mask their withdrawal, while the compromised guard drew suspicion by quietly guiding a false trail away. Amina, hidden in a hollow, clutched the pendant and whispered the original lullaby, its melody carrying like warmth through cold smoke, and the storyteller noted that the climax had broken into pieces. Some would survive, others would be marked, and the battlefield now held raw, aching consequences. The storyteller described the aftermath of the broken climax as a brittle lull between fires. The commander's fury had expanded into a tightening net, and Saeed felt the weight of every compromise. He said, "We drew blood, and he retaliates with shadows. Now the cost is more than retreat." The woman replied, "Harif's intention wasn't to win easily. He embedded endurance into the cracks." They resolved to go deeper, not outward. Instead of chasing the commander's mobilized forces, they would uncover who in the command structure had doubts, a fissure to widen. The compromised guard produced a hidden list of mid-level captains, rumored to question the commander's methods, and the gray-braided healer added, "Whisper to them the lullaby backwards. It will sound like caution, not rebellion." Saeed nodded, saying, "If truth can't move the front, it will erode it from within." The storyteller ended the scene on the quiet pivot toward internal unraveling. The storyteller captured the dangerous diplomacy as Saeed, and the woman approached a hesitant officer rumored to resent the commander's brutality. They met in a dusty granary, and the officer said, "You ask for trust after burning my scout's credibility." The woman replied, "Trust is earned by survival. Harif taught us to see the man behind orders." Saeed tapped the backward lullaby rhythm on the beam, and the officer's guarded expression softened slightly, murmuring, "I've seen how his edicts fracture families. If your whisper can keep my men alive, I will listen." The officer accepted a small token from the woman, a fragment of Harif's codebook, then whispered, "I will feed you caution disguised as compliance." The storyteller underscored that the fracture had spread. The commander's own structure contained dormant cracks, and now the protagonists held a hand on one. The storyteller described the ripple starting. The officer planted coded caution in routine orders, causing the commander's logistics to stutter, and false reports of strength shortages trickled upward. The commander snarled to his lieutenants, "We are losing cohesion. Find the rot." Saeed said to the woman, "He thinks it's sabotage from outside. His paranoia will blind him to the truth." The woman added, "Let him sharpen his focus on ghosts while we pry the next hinge." The compromised guard, trembling with the burden of dual loyalty, confessed quietly, "If this collapses, they will trace it to me." Saeed placed a steady hand on his shoulder and said, "Then your loyalty now is what redeems the past." The storyteller let the tension swell, internal decay advancing while the outward front raged, the climax bending toward inevitability. The storyteller revealed the tipping point as the commander grew suspicious and summoned the officer. The woman intercepted the summons by slipping a counterfeit missive that redirected the confrontation into public scrutiny. The officer confronted the commander with reports of inefficiency cloaked in the language of loyalty, and the commander snapped, "Who undermines me?" The officer, breathing the backward lullaby rhythm under his breath like a prayer, replied, "The system phrase because it forgot why we fight. Order must adapt or collapse." Commander's eyes flicked to Saeed's hidden signal in the courtyard. A subtle gesture from the woman, and the storyteller noted the commander's unease. He sensed the network tightening, not from outside force, but from internal pressure, making him lash out unpredictably. The storyteller closed the act on the unraveling edge. The commander, reacting to the strange internal resistance, ordered a brutal public demonstration of loyalty, forcing village representatives to recite oaths while signaling increased patrols. In the shadow of the spectacle, the woman and Saeed whispered to the officer, "Now," and he slipped into the council with a quiet alteration of the oaths, wording that seeded doubt among the watchers. Amina, hidden among children, hummed the original lullaby barely audible, and the compromised guard moved through the crowd, eyes meeting Saeed's with a silent affirmation. The storyteller described how the seeds of rebellion, once tiny and hidden in rhythm and phrase, now had visible sprouts in the commander's own ranks, making the upcoming confrontation not just a clash of force, but a fracture of allegiance. The storyteller described the crescendo like a tightening noose. Whispers in the commander's ranks had grown teeth, and now the internal fractures erupted outward as mid-level officers openly questioned orders while outward patrols stalled. Saeed and the woman moved through the compound shadows, coordinating with the hesitant officer and the gray-braided healer to time the exposure. The compromised guard, pale with fear, delivered the signal that the commander would convene a council to punish perceived dissent. The woman said, "We show him the cost of blind control," and Saeed replied, "We give his own men the mirror. Let them see their cages." The storyteller noted that the rebellion was no longer secret. It had become a chorus, and the commander's fury, once directed externally, now turned inward, unstable and hungry. The storyteller held breath as the confrontation unfolded. The council assembled under the pretense of rooting out traitors, and the commander, throat tight, accused voices of sabotage. The hesitant officer rose, voice steadying with the backward lullaby hidden in cadence, and said, "Orders fracture when they forget why we protect people, not control them." Others followed, murmurs swelling into open challenge. The commander barked, "Who gave you license to doubt?" The woman stepped forward, placing the cracked photograph of Harif on the table, and said, "He gave us fragments of truth. You built your empire on ashes and fear." Saeed, standing behind her, added, "You used survival as leverage, now the survivors choose." The storyteller captured the collapse of the old hierarchy as the room shifted like earth in an earthquake. The storyteller described the unraveling accelerating. Exposed, the commander lashed out, ordering immediate arrests. But the seeds planted in loyalty bloomed into refusal. Some soldiers lowered weapons, others whispered protective codes, and the internal network activated to shield key allies. The woman cried out, "Hold him to his own words," as the commander tried to brand Saeed a traitor. The hesitant officer declared, "Your order was to protect, you broke it." Saeed stepped forward, voice raw, and said, "We can end this with truth or drown in more fire." The commander, suddenly isolated, realized the net he'd woven had loops that now tightened on him. The storyteller let the room crack with the sound of collapsing power. The storyteller turned to the climax's emotional core. The commander, stripped of automatic obedience, faced the woman alone in the courtyard as the village watched from guarded distances. He said, "You dismantled everything I built with ghosts and songs." She replied, "You built it on fear. Ghosts are the ones who remember the cost." He lunged not with blade but with confession, revealing that his own childhood had been forged in a burning village, and that he had mirrored destruction to feel control. And the woman answered, "Then you were always a reflection of what you burned. I was never your pawn, only the proof that pain can be turned." "I was never your pawn, only the proof that pain can be turned." Saeed appeared behind her, and the commander, voice softening for a moment, whispered, "What do you want?" The woman held the pendant high and said, "You to stop." The storyteller let the moment hang, power reduced to choice. The storyteller closed the tale with the fragile culmination. The commander lowered his head, the rebellion held in breathless suspension, and the villagers gathered as witnesses to his choice. He stepped back, the old uniform hanging loose, and, voice barely audible, said, "I built cages to keep the flames from burning me again." The woman replied, "Then open yours." Amina, appearing at the edge of the courtyard, held out the pendant like an offering and said, "You can choose to stop the fire." The commander reached slowly, placed his hand over the pendant, and in that silence the storyteller offered the final line that rippled. He looked at Saeed and said, "I was wrong about what hatred did to a village.